It's all emotion based. And a lot of people can relate to me because most of the people in the world are more like me than they are like you. That's why we have an obesity epidemic.
You are your own greatest ally or enemy. Awaken the warrior within you. Take charge of your inner kingdom. Welcome to the Warrior Growth Academy podcast.
Welcome to the Warrior Growth Academy podcast, where we build our mental strength in order to not just survive, but to thrive in this life. If we want to thrive, human wellness and well-being and health comes first. Without that, we cannot thrive. And today we have the great pleasure and honor to be with Dr. Patrick Owen, who has been studying nutrition, evolution, in order to understand what makes us feel healthy, what makes us feel good, which is what we all want, isn't it? Patrick, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
Cheers.
So tell me first, even your approach
Yeah.
to this field that is, very, I guess, technical. How do you differentiate and how are you approaching this subject differently, or at least with a different angle?
Well, I think that we have to understand that human beings are quite complex. And I'm always taking evolution as my go-to, as the closest thing to the universal truth. Because frankly, when it comes to, for example, nutrition, I teach at the School of Human Nutrition at McGill, someone will say, well, this is the right way to eat, or this is a bad thing to eat. Whereas we're trying to use research to find this out. And sometimes the research is quite confusing in itself. Like I can have a lot of issues with a lot of nutrition studies. But if I use the idea, like, what does human nutrition say about this? It is my guiding force. And I realize that it's not just nutrition, but it's also everything that has to do with the human condition. Sleep, stress management, psychology, being outdoors, social aspect. So everything together. So even though I specialize in nutrition, I cannot help but bleed into these other aspects of human health. And so now I've become well-versed in psychology, in the environment, for example, and sleep and stress and all these things too. And then when I put it all together, it's like an epiphany for a lot of people. So, hey, I've been doing this diet and I've been working out. How come it's not working? Then I'll ask about sleep and stress. I'll be like, that makes sense. So I think that's the approach that kind of differentiates me from a lot of other nutritionists and health gurus. Yeah.
Amazing. Before getting into more details,
Yeah.
what is the journey that brought you to kind of this way of seeing this field and also of doing what you're doing?
So there's something called a dietary paradox. Have you ever heard of the French paradox?
No.
Basically, American scientists were wondering why the French, with their high consumption of saturated fats and creams and dairy products and baguettes and bread and carbs and cigarette smoking and alcohol consumption, why aren't they obese or dying of heart disease? And so researchers went over there and tried to figure out what's explaining this, because any cardiologist here would say that kind of diet would obviously lead to a heart attack. Must be a paradox. And they came up with, red wine. Red wine seems to protect. And so this led to a series of events that led to me working in the Tibetan highlands to look at other cultures which seem to have an apparent dietary paradox, but only a paradox according to our paradigm of nutrition, which is basically fat is bad, right? Saturated fats and cholesterol is bad and sodium is bad. But in the highlands of Tibet, that's basically what I ate all day, every day in the form of Tibetan tea. So instead of milk and sugar, they would add tons of butter and tons of salt from the moment they wake up to the moment they sleep. So this copious amount of butter and salt that I ingested, of course, I was trained to believe that this was just like a heart attack waiting to happen. I became really stressed out. But it was during that time when I had never felt as good as I have in my life. And this is what I really wish that everybody would know. There was this time in my life where I felt like truly at my best potential. That was then. But I didn't think it was the diet. I thought it was because I was in the Himalayas and that I was, going to bed with the sunset and getting up with the sunrise. And it's when I came back and I really tackled the literature, to find out that there is no such thing as a dietary paradox. Humans can adapt to a wide variety of different diets. And the fact that it did not become obese, in fact, I lost weight. In fact, I got rid of a lot of other chronic metabolic disorders that I was suffering through. I'm not going to go into detail. But you understand, like it's something that confused me because I thought this was a killer diet that I was eating, but I never felt better in my life. But I have to also say that this worked for me. It might not have worked for you, for example. And so I had to explore that more and more in terms of our ancestry. My ancestors from Northern Europe had to survive through long, harsh, cold winters. And there are conditions that are very similar to the high altitudes of the Himalayas, right? Cold, dry. And so very little fruits and vegetables, very little, like almost absent. And copious amounts of butter, fat, salt, dairy. Is basically keto before keto got popular. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that really led me to question everything that I was being taught at school. And I basically, while I was over there, I was looking at a whole other philosophy of looking at health. I was asking Tibetan practitioners, medical practitioners, saying, hey, if someone has a heart issue, what would you give to them? Thinking like here, they would probably give you a baby aspirin or statins or something. But then they started asking me questions. Well, is it a woman, a man, a boy, a girl? Are they married? Are they single? Are they living at a high altitude, low altitude? All these questions which I thought were quite irrelevant. You know, listen, someone comes in with a bad heart. What do you give them? It's a simple question. But I realized how complex it was for them. And again, it's after I realized, oh my gosh, you're right. It depends on so many factors. And based on these factors, they're going to make the logical decision on, for you, I'll prepare this specific combination of medications, which is something that is completely not, we don't see that here in the West. So that completely changed my philosophy when I came back. And when I did my PhD and my postdocs, I always had that mentality that it's way more complicated than we thought. The research can only answer a certain amount, but I was convinced that human beings are a complex, fascinating thing, that we have to look at our ancestry, we have to look at our evolution. And, you know, it's not because carbs are bad or saturated fat is bad. No, it goes way beyond that.
But where to start, actually? Yeah. It is complex, but there must be at least, you know, a beginning to start on the journey of eating better, feeling better. So where do someone start?
Well, if we're talking about straight nutrition, the first thing is, ditch the processed foods.
Okay.
I don't care.
That's simple.
And it's simple, right? You know, whether you're vegan or carnivore, we'll all agree that, you know, fast food, junk food, processed foods, if you eliminate that and liquid calories, for example, you're doing yourself a huge favor just to begin with. If you stick to whole foods, that's the next thing too. If you cook at home rather than ordering in, for example, I do talk in during my segment about a nutritional assault.
Okay.
Right? So a nutritional assault is basically when you're not expecting food, and all of a sudden food arrives and you just gorge, like the pizza. You know, like when the doorbell rings. Exactly. Well, in reverse, because you're being given so much all at once. But when you're cooking at home, the cutting of the knife, the smells, the sounds, the act of cooking is preparing your body for food to come in. But when it just appears, like from, you know, Skip the Dishes or Uber Eats, your body's like, oh, food's coming in. Okay, wait. We got digestive enzymes to make, and you know, and so you're going to almost always overeat because the satiety systems need time to catch up. So just taking up home cooking rather than ordering out can make a massive difference to a lot of people.
Amazing. You said cookie, right? So
cooking.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little bit stuffed up. Yeah.
I got a bit happy. I'm like, okay, home cookie. It's in my home. It's a cookie. Yes. Amazing. All right. And then what are the following steps, right? Because I think the journey of anything of, you know, going on your personal discovery, on the growth in your spiritual, physical, mental life, and in this case of your physical health based on mainly nutrition for now, what are the next stages of also figuring out what, because whole foods is huge, right? It's as much a keto diet as much as a vegan diet. So technically you can still optimize other things even if you cut out all the unnecessary things.
So here's where it gets into a little bit of an area where it can be potentially controversial, and I use somatotypes, which is a body type. Say for example, you could walk into my clinic. I will assess your body type. Basically, you're more towards an ectomorph. Now, I understand there's a lot of controversy out there, and that's understandable because when you're getting at the end of the spectrums, they're not like discrete categories, but it's like you're somewhere on the spectrum. When you're at one end or the other, it really makes more sense. It just gets a little messy towards like somewhere in the middle because there's way more flexibility, but I will assume that you're more towards the ectomorphic or the mesoectomorphic.
Which is like more slim?
Exactly. Now, slims... Now I would ask you a bunch of questions too, because I would ask about your sleep quality, the stresses at work and your life and everything like that, because most of the time, these body types are associated with certain behaviors as well. Now we're getting to the psychology of it. So here are the assumptions that I make, and then I would ask you questions in order to support these assumptions or discard them. And the assumptions that I would make is basically you're more... your dopamine levels are better regulated than someone who's on the other end of the spectrum, which means that you're not going to binge. Your ability to binge is probably low. You have a cookie, maybe two, you feel like that's good. You're highly disciplined, right? You're probably a lone wolf. You can do things on your own without like, oh, you know, my Zumba class is canceled, so you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I right so far?
100%.
All right, let's keep going because I have a whole bunch of assumptions. You prefer cardio or metabolic conditioning rather than powerlifting and strength training, right? You're also a person who has more nervous energy that comes out. Now, it might not seem like you're nervous, but you just got to move. No, you just like, instead of like you have 20 minutes, you feel like, yeah, I'm going to do something rather than I'm just going to veg and watch YouTube or something, right? Another assumption is that you have a hard time staying still. Like your mind is like, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this. And it's whether it's morning, it's whether it's night, you're going to have the same level of commitment and energy to get things done. So far, so good?
Yeah.
See, I hardly know this about you, but I'm making tons of
scary
assumptions here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk about nutrition. You're a guy who can eat as much as you want and not gain weight. And as much as you want basically doesn't mean that you're going to overconsume, again, because of that dopamine. You're more into intuitive eating rather than emotional eating, right? And in that regard, you have more of a delayed gratification. You're more cognizant of delayed gratification than instant gratification. So you know that if you have 3 cookies, you're probably going to regret it tomorrow. So you're going to be like, I'm not going to have 3 cookies.
Sometimes I do.
But you're not going to have 4. So you're more disciplined in that way because you're more intuitive with your body's needs. You understand the power of delayed gratification. And that's all dopamine, which is the reward hormone, right? So these are assumptions where if you say like, hey, I want to optimize my health, for example, I'd say, well, number one, you know, bread, if you want, sure, I don't care. You can digest it well, fantastic. Whereas if I eat too much bread, I would definitely gain fat. So a low carb diet would work a lot better for my body type, but for you, go ahead. 60% of your calories can come from carbs and you can get away with it, which is why a lot of people in that kind of body type will actually feel better on a vegetarian diet because there's so many carbs in there. And so they can't understand when I say like, well, there's a lot of, you know, deficiency issues or possibilities and it's not, you know, optimized. They'll be like, but I feel amazing on it. And that's one of the reasons why. See, if I went on a vegan diet, I would feel, I tried it for maybe 3 hours. It was horrible.
Basically, you just...
it was the worst 3 hours of my life.
Okay.
But you see all these assumptions that I'm making? I'm not going to tell you all this now. I'm just, you know, making it where like we're doing a podcast. But your be like a role would be like for me to ask you those questions in order to support or deny these things and or discard these things. And then from there, I realized like, okay, well, you're the exception to this. But I definitely would have in mind a program for you for the best nutrition. But if you had an objective saying, Pat, I want to put on more muscle. I want to get better. It's just like, well, now that's a whole other thing now. Because given your body type, your genetics, and your background, I'd have to formulate the plan of more protein, more fat, more calories. And that's hard. You're going to have a tough time.
Is there a way someone on their own, obviously with a specialist,
Yeah.
Working with someone who knows that stuff is always great, but, someone who's, again, just wants to feel better, eat better, but kind of, again, after the stage of cutting off as much processed food as possible, then figuring out if it's more, vegetarian, more pescatarian, more carnivore.
Yeah, so let's use this you versus me here. Let's have the spectrum so that you're more of an ectomorphic part and I'm more of an endomorphic. And for those who are listening in, one kind of unscientific way to do this is take your middle finger and your thumb of one hand and then put it around the bony part of your wrist on the other hand. If, like me, your fingers don't touch, you're more towards the endomorphic part of the spectrum. If they touch, like they just touch, you're more mesomorphic. And if they go past comfortably, you're ectomorphic. So you touch and you can comfortably go a little bit more past.
Yeah.
So same here, I don't touch.
Okay.
So basically the program and the nutrition plan that I would give you would be completely different than for me. For me, here's what works. More of a protein and fat-based diet. And this is because my ancestors were so good at efficiently converting dietary carbs into body fat in order to increase the chances of surviving over long, harsh, cold winters. So our dopamine levels would say, and this determines like our ability to approach or avoid things, right? It's basically a reward thing, but it's also a conditioning aspect to it. But I would proactively like go out of my way to get as many blueberries from the blueberry bush, to scarf them down my throat, and then I'd be so insulin sensitive that I might be able to be more efficient to convert those carbohydrates into body fat compared to you. But then my ancestors might be in a better position to survive the harshest, coldest winters compared to your ancestors. Do you know what I mean? So it was a huge survival advantage in the past, but now it's a huge disadvantage in our modern society,
because we have access
where
to everything.
carbs are just acceptable, delicious, cheap, affordable, available. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So people with my body type are at a huge disadvantage in the modern world. And so I would say, yeah, more protein, more fat. Be careful with the grains and the legumes, like the really carbohydrate stuff, because not only will you be your body's more efficient at converting it into body fat, that's number one, but number two, that dopamine, we are very susceptible to dopamine spikes. So we are more susceptible to using food as a coping mechanisms for our emotions. We are more susceptible for emotional eating. So we got to really be careful with our state. Are we getting enough sleep? Are we stressed out? Are we, and it could be a good thing too. Like you want to emphasize good times with good food. It's all emotion based. And a lot of people can relate to me because most of the people in the world are more like me than they are like you. That's why we have an obesity epidemic.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're stressed out. We're anxious, we have mental issues, and we're coping with maladaptive mechanisms such as food, alcohol, drugs, video games, social media, YouTube, porn, dating sites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Right?
All related to dopamine.
All related to dopamine and all related to a way to cope or to kind of like make us feel better, instant gratification, for something that's inside, good or bad. It's just emotional. But food is an easy one because it's, legal. Accepted.
Yeah. So speaking about feeling good,
Yeah.
you have one incredible class on the platform about the origins and the science of feeling good, which obviously nutrition is a part of, but there's different components.
Yeah.
Tell me.
So it really is combining everything together. And it all starts, in my opinion, with sleep, good sleep. So I know from my experience that if I don't sleep well, my hunger and my appetite is going to be through the roof, especially for hyperpalatable foods, right? something delicious.
Yeah.
But when you're tired, you might not feel like going to the gym or something. We both deal with it very, very differently. So it all starts with sleep, because sleep is a non-negotiable in life. And if you think about it, sleep is, well, you're vulnerable, right? If you're going to, have evolution, it's natural selective, you want someone to not be vulnerable at all, right? To be on their best and always fighting. But no, that is a law of life here on earth. You must have a period of rest to recuperate, recycle, consolidate, et cetera, et cetera. So sleep is a non-negotiable. So when we are at our most vulnerable, and this was a true thing, like back in our ancestors' day, we were very vulnerable at night, most vulnerable from predation, mostly insects and rodents and whatever, or I don't know, bears or something.
Yeah.
So we had adapted certain strategies in order to decrease that vulnerability. Number one, probably the most important, we had each other. Co-sleeping is a really important aspect of feeling safe, especially with families. Here in the West, now we're trying to get the kids to have their own rooms in order to promote independence. But there's no doubt about it that co-sleeping has massive amounts of benefits. So I really promote co-sleeping, but I do understand the whole bedroom. Why not have both? I don't know. It really is, I'm not here to judge. Parents are parents. Second, we had a fire. We always had a fire to sleep with. And our sleep in the ancestral patterns of sleeping was always interrupted because we had to tend the fire. So fire obviously was a game changer. Now, Homo sapiens, we didn't discover how to control fire. That was around for millions of years prior to that. We don't even know. I think prior to Homo erectus even. But we know that the ability to control fire and the increased amount of meat consumption led to our evolution of Homo sapiens.
How?
Well, prior to that, we were Australopithecus. We were mostly vegetarian, but not completely. We had snails and insects, and we were bipedal. We had sexual dimorphism, which means that if an alien came down, they could probably differentiate a male from a female of the species. So there's a lot of things that we had in common, but they were still not of the genus Homo. Now, later on, there's a lot of divergent branches, and it's still a little bit like trying to figure it out. But we can talk about Homo erectus and Homo habilis if we go further back. And it seems that their ability to use fire seems to have been there. But to be able to fully control it, that's much later on. So Homo erectus, which was basically what came slightly before us. When we were able to do that, that changed everything. We became more of a hunter. First, we had protection against predators of the night, right? We basically own the night now. So we stayed up later. And when we were able to stay up later, we were able to tell stories and do art on caves. And so we owe our modern society and the hierarchy and the structure of it to fire, or the ability to light up the night. And second, it was a massively amazing hunting tool, and we were the only animals in the world to be able to cook. So we used to eat raw meat, as is evidenced by zooarchaeology in these caverns or sites. So there's definitely evidence of human stone tools and human teeth marks on these bones. We used to gnaw on it, like on these bones, right? But we were like low tier. So we were basically scavengers or opportunists, but we're never like an apex predator. At that time, we almost always ate ungulates, like hoofed animals, like antelopes and buffaloes. And our main competitor were large cats, lions, jaguars, tigers, things like that. And it really wasn't until we were able to master fire that we became part of the carnivore guild. So now we were on par with the big cats. So that was the game changer, because now, instead of being scavengers, we actually, as a social bunch, we actually killed animals that were bigger than us for the first time ever. Not only that, but we had what we now know as a kill site and then a harvesting site to make it safe. Because where we killed was usually in the open savanna, which was like, oh my gosh, anybody can be attacking us here. We need to drag this carcass or pieces of this carcass to a processing site, which is usually surrounded by trees, and it's a lot more safer. We have archaeological evidence that shows this kind of pattern, but we also saw increased amounts of cooking the food. And cooked meat versus raw meat,
Way better.
way better. And we've developed that taste, that selective pressure to completely prefer barbecue than than raw meat,
Yeah.
right? It eliminated viruses, bacteria, it freed up way more nutrition, and the consumption of meat and protein and fat just skyrocketed. And this provided a huge a series of events that led us to more hunting, more of a social aspect, social communication, nonverbal communication. It really led to the evolution of Homo erectus that gave rise to us, a very highly complex social creature with the most facial muscles ever on any animal to ever appear on Earth, right? To now being able, and we're omnivore, there's no doubt about it. I don't care what you say, but the dentition is perfect for cooked meat and plant matter. And so we have the building materials now to form the largest, hungriest brain ever to appear on Earth. And that would not have been possible with just carbohydrates. So yeah, so fire made us human and meat made us human.
Interesting. So now you named sleep.
Yeah, sleep
What are
is the
the other
most.
components?
So sleep, if you're not getting enough sleep, and we have, back in the days, predation was the main thing. Now it's psychosocial stress and blue light. If we don't get enough sleep, our stress system becomes activated. So my next thing is stress. So obviously the sleep stress cycle is the same thing. If you're stressed, you're probably going to not be able to sleep. If you're not going to be able to sleep, you're probably going to be stressed. And it's a vicious, vicious cycle. So where do you start? Sleep. But how do you get better sleep? This is the kicker. To get better sleep, you need melatonin. But I don't want you to supplement with melatonin. I want you to make more serotonin, which is the happy hormone. Because once that blue light is cut down, when you shut off your lights, and if you're scrolling on TikTok or something like that, you stop that, right? Put that away. No electronics 30 minutes before bedtime at least. But you need more serotonin during the day. That means you got to be happy. But a good, nice trick that I use is just go outside. Because the more time you spend out in the sun, the more serotonin ends up in your brain. The more serotonin there is in your brain when you shut off the light, the more that the serotonin is converted to melatonin. The more melatonin you have while you sleep, the better, deeper, more restful your sleep is. So this is why it basically is, I said, well, we'll start getting better sleep, more consistent sleep. Okay. But at the same time, go outside every day, get some sun exposure and try to do things that make you feel good during the day too. Hang out with some friends, get that serotonin up during the day, and that's going to break the cycle. So stress, sleep and stress are basically my number one, number two, because no matter what kind of nutrition or training plan you're following, that cortisol associated with stress is basically putting you in a stressful state, and fat is a stress tissue. So you're not even able to mobilize that fat. Yeah, so you got to get that cortisol down. Now, the difference between a person like you and a person like me is that that nervous energy, that stress just comes out like that. Like through action, right? Because that's what action is. It's fight or flight. It requires action. Do something about it. But now psychosocial stress, you're sitting in traffic or you're in front of your computer freaking out about deadlines. That's not evolutionary aligned with how we deal with stress. We're supposed to move, which is why we know how exercise and moving and physical activity is so good for our mental health. That is why. It's an outlet for our stress. The problem is that as you get closer to my body type, you also have a maladaptive mechanism to deal with stress, and that's through food, alcohol, Netflix, et cetera, et cetera. And that has long-term health consequences. But to understand like your individual ancestry, not only where you're from in the world, but also like your body type and everything, can give me so much insight into what the issues are. Yeah. For you, sleep, I don't think is much of an issue. If it is, it's because I have so much things to do. and everything. For a person like me, it might be I consistently go to bed too late because I want to finish watching this TV show. So it could be different. And I try to think about like what's going on and then how to do it, make a plan. You'd be a person to actually follow the plan really well. Whereas a person like me would like, yeah, tell me what to do because I don't trust myself. I know what to do, but I'm not able to be consistent. And that's the issue. So how do you become consistent? Yeah, you gotta stick to this plan. And the fact is that discipline, we can both be very, very disciplined, but if you fall off the wagon, you'll be like, Jakub, no, get back on, man, get the plan. Whereas if I fall off the wagon, I'm like, game over, done. Oh, gosh, well, I cheated, might as well go all the way. I had 3 cookies. You know what? I should finish the box. That way I can get back on plan tomorrow. Oh, no, tomorrow I got this. I don't have to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this brings into another aspect of whether you should be a moderator like you or an abstainer like me. So a person who can have 2 cookies, fantastic. You can stop. If I have 2 cookies, I'm going to be thinking, I would love to have a third. So for me, it would take more energy and more mind power to stop what could potentially become a binge midway through. For me, it takes less energy to not begin at all. So for a person like me, I'd have to be a little bit more strict. Hate to say it, but no bread for me. No pasta, no pizza. You know, but for you, go for it.
I'm going for it.
Yeah, you bastard.
Listen, Patrick, this is absolutely incredible, and you really make something that is, very technical and also sometimes boring or even stressful. You make it really interesting. So thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for being here today and being obviously on the platform. You have to check out the class on nutrition. You will understand all the different body types, all the different realities of all the different components of food, all the different studies and all the different ideas, and also the other class that is incredible about the origins and science of feeling good. And that includes all the things that he mentioned, including sleep and also the stress and everything that goes into it. And it's nothing too complicated. It's not something that you need to master the subject. It's literally just realizing those importances and those elements and simply making little adjustments, little incremental improvements on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Make sure to subscribe to the channel to not miss any more of those incredible conversations, and I'll see you at the next one.